After 24 years serving my country, the drive home for my wife's anniversary was supposed to be a triumph. Instead, a rogue officer robbed me at gunpoint, never suspecting he had just picked a fight with a colonel. The drive home was supposed to be the best part of my year. 24 years in the Army, deployments to places you only see in grim-faced news reports, and the one thing that never got easier was the leaving. But the coming home, that was the reward. This time was special. My wife, Eleanor, and I were about to celebrate our 25th anniversary. I'd been stateside for a month, stuck in debriefings and paperwork at the Pentagon, and I was finally done. I hadn't told her I was coming tonight. The plan was simple. Slip into the house, set the table with the takeout from her favorite Italian place, and put the small, velvet box next to her plate. Inside my jacket, in a crisp bank envelope, was $1,000 in cash. It was for the final payment on an antique silver locket Eleanor had fallen in love with months ago. The jeweler was an old-fashioned guy who preferred cash for the last installment. The money felt warm against my chest, a tangible piece of the surprise I had so carefully orchestrated. I was 5 miles from my own driveway, humming along to some forgotten song on the radio, when the world turned into a carnival of red and blue lights in my rearview mirror. I pulled over immediately, my mind doing a quick system check. Speed? Exactly the limit. Tail lights? Checked them this morning. I wasn't worried, just annoyed. This was a delay I didn't need. A stocky officer with a bristling mustache and a chip on his shoulder the size of a dinner plate swaggered up to my window. He tapped the glass with the butt of his flashlight, a little harder than necessary. I powered the window down. "Evening, officer," I said, keeping my voice even and calm. My hands were at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, visible and still. "License and registration," he grunted, not making eye contact, instead letting his gaze sweep over the interior of my 10-year-old but immaculately kept sedan. I handed them over. He took his time looking at them, then back at me. "You know why I pulled you over?" "No, sir, I can't say that I do." "You rolled through that stop sign about a half-mile back," he said, his voice flat. It was a lie. I'm a colonel in the United States Army. Following rules isn't just my job, it's my entire personality. I come to a complete 3-second stop, even at the stop sign at the end of my own driveway. "With all due respect, officer," I said, my voice still level, "I'm certain I came to a complete stop." That was my mistake. His eyes, which had been dismissive, now snapped to mine, filled with a sudden, sharp anger. "Are you calling me a liar, son?" he asked, leaning down. The condescension dripped from the word son. I was 51 years old. Before I could answer, he sniffed the air dramatically. "I smell marijuana. I'm going to need you to step out of the car. Now." Another lie. I've never touched the stuff in my life, but I knew this script. I'd seen it play out in 100 different videos, heard 100 different stories. This was no longer a traffic stop. My training kicked in. Threat assessment. The officer was agitated, unpredictable, and held all the power. The objective was de-escalation and survival. "No problem, officer," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt slowly. I got out of the car, hands raised where he could see them. He slammed me against the side of my own vehicle, the metal cold against my cheek. He patted me down roughly, his hands lingering on my pockets. He found my wallet, pulled it out, and then his fingers closed around the envelope in my jacket pocket. He pulled it out and his eyes widened as he fanned the bills. 10 $100 bills. Well, he sneered, the fake pretense of the traffic stop evaporating completely. "What do we have here? That's a lot of cash for a guy like you to be carrying around." "It's for an anniversary gift for my wife," I said, my jaw tight. I could feel the anger, cold and hard, starting to build in my gut, but I suppressed it. Stay calm. Explain the situation. He laughed, a short, ugly bark. An anniversary gift? Sure it is. Looks more like drug money to me. You know, we have a thing called civil asset forfeiture. We suspect this money is the proceeds of a crime. We can seize it. He wasn't even trying to be subtle. He was a highwayman with a badge. Officer, that is my private property. You have absolutely no cause. That's when he unholstered his weapon. He didn't point it at my head, not directly. He just held it in a low, ready position, his finger resting on the trigger guard. The message was unmistakable. The cool evening air suddenly felt thick, heavy. Every sound seemed to fade away except for the blood pounding in my ears. I've had rifles pointed at me by enemy combatants. I've been in firefights where the air itself hummed with bullets. But there was something uniquely terrifying about this moment on a quiet suburban street 5 miles from my home. I think I have about 1,000 reasons right here in my hand, he said, waving the envelope. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to get back in your car, you're going to drive away, and you're going to forget this ever happened. If I see you again, or hear so much as a whisper about this, I'll make sure this money is the least of your problems. He tucked my money into his own pocket. My $1,000. The locket for my wife. Gone. He looked me in the eye, a smug, triumphant smirk on his face. He saw a man he could intimidate, a victim. He had no idea who he was looking at. He thought he had all the power. He thought he had won. My mind was racing, cataloging every detail. His face, his name tag, which read Miller, the number of his patrol car. He was making the biggest mistake of his life. I got back in the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. For a full minute, I just sat there, the engine idling, the red and blue lights of Miller's cruiser shrinking in my rearview mirror until they were gone. The silence he left behind was filled with a roaring in my ears. I forced myself to take a deep, controlled breath. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4. Box breathing. The technique had grounded me in the middle of rocket attacks and firefights. It grounded me now. The anger was a white-hot coal in my chest, but I couldn't let it consume me. Anger is a fire that cauterizes or consumes. I needed to let it cauterize, to harden me for what came next. The $1,000 was gone. The locket, the surprise, the perfect anniversary, all of it snatched away by a cheap thug in a uniform. He saw my black skin, my decent but not flashy car, and he saw a payday, an easy mark. He didn't see the command chevrons on my uniform hanging in my closet at home. He didn't see the flag that had draped a friend's coffin that I had personally handed to a grieving mother. He didn't see the man who had planned military campaigns with more moving parts than this entire town's police force. He saw a stereotype, and his greed and prejudice blinded him to the reality. When I pulled into my driveway, the house was dark and quiet. Eleanor was likely asleep. The takeout on the passenger seat was cold, its aroma now mocking me. I left it in the car. I walked into my home, the sanctuary I had fought for, and it felt violated. I poured myself a glass of water in the dark kitchen and stood by the window, looking out at the peaceful, tree-lined street that now felt hostile. The humiliation was a bitter taste in my mouth. For 24 years, I had worn a uniform that represented order, discipline, and the rule of law. And tonight, another uniform had been used to commit armed robbery against me. The anger began to cool, solidifying into something far more dangerous: purpose. Officer Miller thought this was over. He thought I was scared, that I would swallow this injustice and move on. He had miscalculated. This was no longer about $1,000. This was about the oath I took, the same one he had likely taken and then desecrated. It was about the principle. He had initiated a conflict and I was going to finish it. He had picked the wrong target. I went into my study, the one room in the house that was truly mine, and closed the door. I didn't turn on the lights. The glow from my laptop was enough. I bypassed the local police department's website, the internal affairs complaint form. That was Miller's territory, his system. It was designed to protect men like him. I would not be fighting this battle on his turf. I would choose the terrain. I pulled up a secure contact list, a collection of numbers and email addresses I had accumulated over 2 decades of service. Men and women in positions of power who trusted my judgment, people who owed me favors. My finger hovered over one name in particular. General Markinson, my former commanding officer, now a very powerful, very well-connected civilian contractor with deep ties to the Department of Justice. We had been through hell and back together in Kandahar. I typed out a short, precise email. I wasn't asking for help. I was providing a mission brief. Subject: request for information, unlawful seizure. Body: Mark. I need a full jacket on a patrol officer. Town of Northwood. Name: Miller. C badge No. 714. Need his service record. Any complaints, sealed or otherwise. Financials: known associates. I also need the same on his chief of police, a man named Frank Donovan. This is not an official request. It is a personal one. Time sensitive. I hit send. It was 11:14 p.m. At 11:17 p.m., my phone buzzed with a reply. On it, Jack. You have a hornet's nest? I'll get you the stick to poke it with. Call me in the morning. I leaned back in my chair, the first piece of the puzzle moving into place. Miller thought he was a lone predator hunting in the dark. He had no idea he was now the subject of a coordinated intelligence-gathering operation. And I wasn't just planning to poke the nest. I was planning to burn it to the ground. My next call wasn't to a general or a spy. It was to the one man I knew who could turn information into a weapon that could dismantle a man's life without ever firing a shot. I dialed the number of the best investigative journalist in the state, a man who owed me his life after I pulled him out of a sticky situation in Ramadi. "Paul," I said when he answered, my voice steady and cold. "It's Jack Reed. I have a story for you. And I have a question. How would you like to own the front page for the next month?" There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. Then Paul's voice, low and alert, the familiar sound of a predator catching a scent. "Jack, it's been a long time. Tell me you're not calling from some god-forsaken desert." "I'm 5 miles from my own kitchen, Paul," I replied, my voice hard, "and I just got robbed at gunpoint by a police officer." I gave him the short, unvarnished version of the story. I could practically hear him scribbling notes. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "Jack, this is dynamite," he said. "But it's your word against a cop's. It's a tough story to nail down." "He said it was drug money from a guy like me," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "He took $1,000 meant for my wife's 25th anniversary present. He did it because he saw a black man and assumed he was a criminal and an easy victim. This isn't just about me, Paul. He's done this before. I'd bet my pension on it." "And I'd bet you're right," Paul agreed. "What do you need?" "I need you to be ready," I told him. "I'm going to get you everything you need to corroborate this. Evidence. Maybe even another victim. Just be prepared to move fast when I give you the signal." The next morning, the information from General Markinson started to flood my inbox. It was everything I expected and worse. Officer Miller had a history. 3 excessive force complaints, all dismissed. 2 internal reviews for mishandling of evidence, both times involving cash seizures from minority drivers. Both times the charges against the drivers were mysteriously dropped after the cash was processed. His financials were a mess of high-interest loans and gambling debts. He was a desperate man with a badge and a gun, preying on the people he was sworn to protect. The file on his chief, Frank Donovan, was even more illuminating. Donovan wasn't just a bystander. He was the architect of Miller's career, personally squashing every complaint against him. Miller was his pit bull. Armed with this information, I made another call, this time to a young captain at the state police barracks, a sharp woman who'd served under my command in a joint task force years ago. I explained the situation, forwarded her Markinson's intel, and laid out my plan. She was horrified, but not surprised. "Colonel," she said, her voice firm, "you tell me what you need." The trap was set. My plan wasn't to file a complaint and hope for the best. It was to launch a full-scale assault. Phase 1 was complete. Phase 2 began that evening. I parked my car, a different one this time, borrowed from a neighbor, a block away from a diner known to be Miller's favorite spot for his dinner break. I waited. Sure enough, at 8:15 p.m., his cruiser pulled into the parking lot. He swaggered inside, leaving his car unlocked. It was the arrogance of a man who believed he was untouchable. I didn't break into his car. I didn't need to. I had something better. A small, high-fidelity audio bug. Compliments of Markinson's toolkit. It took me less than 30 seconds to plant it under the driver's side dashboard. Then I melted back into the darkness. For the next 2 days I listened. I listened to Miller brag to his partner about traffic stops. I listened to him make racist jokes. And then, on the third night, I heard it. The jackpot. A call came in. A minor fender bender. Miller arrived on the scene and found a young Latino man, scared and apologetic. Miller's tone shifted, becoming predatory. He ran the kid's license and started his script. "I smell marijuana. Step out of the car." My blood ran cold as I listened to a direct echo of my own experience. He bullied the young man, found a few $100s in his glove compartment, money the kid said was for his rent, and confiscated it using the same threat of civil forfeiture. That was the signal. I made 2 calls. The first was to Paul. "Go," I said. The second was to the state police captain. "He just hit another target. The victim is a Mr. Alvarez. Location is Route 7 and Elm. You know what to do." The next morning, Paul's story broke online. Decorated Army colonel robbed at gunpoint by local cop. It was a bombshell. My name, my photo in full dress uniform, my extensive service record. It was all there, juxtaposed against Officer Miller's sordid history of complaints, which Paul laid out in meticulous, damning detail. The story went viral. By noon, every news van in the state was camped outside the Northwood Police Department, just as Chief Donovan was preparing a statement about a disgruntled individual making baseless accusations against a fine officer. The state police descended. They walked into the department with a warrant signed by a federal judge. The warrant wasn't just for Miller's locker and patrol car. It was for the chief's office, for the department's asset forfeiture records, for everything. The young man from the traffic stop, Mr. Alvarez, was there with them, ready to give a statement. The audio from my bug, perfectly legal since it recorded Miller in the commission of a felony in his public patrol car, was the nail in the coffin. I watched the press conference on TV. A stone-faced state police commander announced the immediate suspension of Miller and Chief Donovan, pending a full federal investigation into a pattern of racketeering and civil rights violations. An hour later, my doorbell rang. Eleanor opened it to find a flustered-looking detective from the state police. In his hand, he held a bank envelope, my $1,000. He apologized profusely, calling the incident a disgrace to law enforcement. I took the envelope and thanked him. Later that evening, Eleanor and I finally had our anniversary dinner. I placed the small velvet box next to her plate. Her eyes lit up as she opened it, revealing the antique silver locket. She loved it. "It's beautiful, Jack," she whispered, her fingers tracing the intricate design. "How did you manage this?" I looked at my wife, the woman who had stood by me through deployments, danger, and distance. I just called in a few old friends, I said, taking her hand. Miller saw a target. He should have seen a soldier. He started a fight, but I finished the war. And as I sat there, holding my wife's hand, I felt the best part of coming home. Not just the peace, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes justice is a mission you have to plan and execute yourself.